£27,500. That's a big number, and that number represents the amount of money which I have spent on energy in the 10 years prior to getting these solar panels installed. That energy comes in the form of transportation, diesel, electricity, propane and firewood. And what we're going to be doing is reviewing how much money I'm going to be spending on energy from now on. And this video is special because it marks 4 years of these solar panels being in operation. So, for those people who haven't watched my previous videos, my name's Anthony and I own a 9 kilowatt solar panel array up here in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. Many videos describe these solar panels in more detail, but in this video we're not just going to be reviewing the solar panels in terms of the last 4 years. We're also going to be looking at what ideas I have for future development. So first of all, we're going to be looking at the performance of these solar panels for the last 4 months. So let's talk about performance and returns on investment for the whole year. Now, we've still got a few days left in December, but I'm not expecting anything more than 40 to 50 kilowatt hours between now and the new year. So 6,894 kilowatt hours is the recorded production up until the 6th of December. How does that compare to previous years? Well, they've been about 7 and 7.1 megawatt hours respectively. So it's quite poor. If we have a look at the performance figures, you can see that our statistics for March, April, January, June, they've all been lagging somewhat. But we have had some redemption in August, not so much in November, and about just under average for September. So all told, yeah, not the best years, and a lot of people can probably relate to this year being quite poor, especially in the first half. Because you can see that the production here was the very best production we had for any August in the life of this solar panel array. Now, August 2022 was also very good, but because of battery commissioning issues, we lost production data for the last 6 days of August. But September wasn't so good. This was the worst performing September that we have had, but not by much. So it's well within statistical norms. October as well within statistical norms, 342 kilowatt hours. November, on the other hand, not very good. We've had battery production in November 2022, 23, and now 2024. So going into August in more detail, one of the things you can see is that we had one day which was higher than 50 kilowatt hours. If we have a look at that in more detail, you can see it was an almost perfect day of production with just a few cloudy interludes in the middle of the day. The worst day of production was the 19th of August. And again, you can see even though it was the worst day of production, we were still producing more electricity than we were consuming. Overall though, with the use of my electric car, I was consuming about half of all of the energy produced for August. So into September, on the 19th of September, that was the very best day that we had, and we were producing 40 kilowatt hours of electricity, and that is rather exceptional. So on the best day, you can see here, we had a perfect production day, peaking out at about 5.7 kilowatts during the middle of the day. The worst day of production, that would be the 24th of September. So that was only 2 kilowatt hours of production. Very cloudy day. Let's have a look there. You can see we were barely producing more electricity than we were consuming, and the rest of the time we were draining the battery. But as you can see with the battery levels, we still ended the day with some charge left in the battery. So you can see here we were using a steady consumption throughout the whole day, and this is representative of the use of the heat pump and one of the earlier times during the autumn time. So into October, we had the best day early on in the month. That was 29 kilowatt hours of production. Not a perfect day by all accounts. We still had some cloudy interludes in the middle of the day, but you can still see in early October we were breaching the 5 kilowatt mark in the just before noon there. So the worst day was not too far later on. It was 1.3 kilowatt hours on the 7th of October. So what you can see is that there was a very heavy consumption in the middle of the night, but during the daytime there was barely surplus solar power to keep things going during the daytime. But still, nonetheless, it still kept things going and stopped the battery from draining. And you could see here that despite the very poor production that we had, we ended the day with surplus battery. Now, one of the things you can see in November is that we had the best day. That was the 3rd of November, 16 kilowatt hours. But the worst days were jointly held. 19th and 20th were bad days. 23rd and 24th were also bad days. And the reason for those bad days was simply down to the fact that we had snow on the roof. So that was one of the reasons why the production was not very good for the month of November. So as you can see, the best day was on the 3rd of November. We were generating 16 kilowatt hours of electricity. And this is a perfect uninterrupted day. And for those of you who have watched my previous videos, you know that the dip in the middle of the day is down to a tree which exists directly south from my location. So you get a big dip during the middle of the day, but you get a peak in the morning time of 3.3 kilowatts and a peak in the afternoon of about 2.7 kilowatts. And all told, we were running the heat pump for most of the day, and it clicked off in the middle of the afternoon, where it was just about warm enough to not need any more heating. But then it came back on fairly soon after. Now, one thing I will say is that from the 20th of November onwards, I was away from home. But as you can see, the consumption was still quite high. And this is because it was very cold during the daytime, and the heat pump was having to keep the temperature in the house maintained at about 12 degrees Celsius. I'm going to talk about that in a separate video. So now the question is going to be, well, how much money have these solar panels now returned back to me? We generated about just under £1,200 worth of value from our solar. If we have a look in the context of historical returns, it's a lot worse compared to last year, and that is simply down to the fact that electricity prices are a lot cheaper. So your savings, of course, are going to be less. But nonetheless, we've had this solar panel array in operation for about 4 years. The original investment was £11,000, and now we've returned just over £5,200 of that original investment. So we're nearly halfway there. I'm very pleased with that investment. Now, battery returns, on the other hand, £836. The original investment was £7,500. So not a very good return on investment. Let's have a look at that in a little bit of detail. Battery consumption direct from solar. Now, this is solar power which not exported and it's not curtailed. It's stored in the battery and then it's used in the evening time. That could be a return on investment which is attached to the solar investment, but I've decided to attach it to the battery investment instead. So this is added to this number, but it's subtracted from this number here. So in previous videos, I mentioned that I was interested in having a solar fence installed in my property. And what I want to do is describe the ideas in further detail and show you how things are progressing in that instance. The idea I've got is to have 4 solar panels in landscape format covering the face of this shed. And sure, I know I've got windows here, and to be quite frank, I don't particularly need the daylight inside the shed, so I'm quite happy to sacrifice daylight in order to have some producing power here. This gets a good amount of sunshine in the early to mid-afternoon. And the thing about fences is that they do rot. fence posts do rot. So the basis of this project is one of renewing my fence, because if we go over here, these fences, these are the cheap type. These are quite flimsy panels and they're starting to fall apart, and I've had the thought of replacing them with solar panels. I have to replace the fence posts, and you know what, when I was replacing this fence post over here, it was an absolute devil's job trying to remove concrete from the ground using a farm jack and a chain. Not something I've done before, but it was exhausting work, and you really have to be careful with your back doing so. It's not a job I'm looking forward to doing here, because I'm going to have to replace every single fence post. But if I have solar panels here, I can use bifacial solar panels, 435 watt panels, which JA Solar are marketing, and I can have conduit along the bottom of the fence for running the DC wire. That's the idea I've got. Initially, we could have 10 solar panels, maybe just 6 to start off with, doing those ones over there first, and then the shed. 6 is pretty much the minimum that I'd need to have in order to have guarantee the minimum activation voltage for the inverter. And I think 10 is the maximum I can have in order to prevent going over the maximum open circuit voltage for the inverter. But let's have a look inside. Now, it's always worth just simply seeing what the voltage on this test solar panel is. It's 37.9 volts. This is December. We don't even have direct sunshine. So that gives me an idea of what the open circuit voltage is under medium daylight conditions without direct sunshine. Now, in terms of where I want to have a battery, ideally I'd want to have it inside my house because it's warmer. But there are new standards which came into effect in April this year, which basically prohibited you from installing batteries in spaces in rooms which are going to be used for emergency exit. So I had the idea of installing a battery in my utility room, but since the utility room is also the room with the back door, I can't use that as a room for installing a battery, which is a shame, because having a battery inside a warm thermal envelope is a much more preferable place to have it. But instead, I'm going to have to install it in my shed. So I've been making some space available in my shed to have a 600 by 600 server rack cabinet, in which I can install some Pylon Tech batteries. And then we can have this space up here for the inverter, and then we can run all the cables up to the rafters and then along in conduit. So that's the idea I've got in terms of projects. Whether I'm going to go ahead with it or not really is an open question. We're going to go into the studio and we're going to discuss that in a bit more detail. So when considering the value of a new battery and what value that brings to me, I need to consider first what value my existing battery is bringing to me. Now, I'm reckoning 19 years worth of payback is what I'm getting out of my Solar Edge battery. That is a lot worse than what I originally envisaged when I was making the investment decision over 2 years ago. As you can see, the best usage case for getting break even on your battery is to take generated solar electricity, store it in the battery, and then use it in the evening time for domestic consumption. If you can do that and charge the battery completely every single day and then use all of that battery every single night, then you can get 100% utilization out of your battery, and you will get a return on your payback of about just under 10 years. And that's the best way to do it. However, your utilization rate in actual fact is much lower. It's about 110 days. Now, if you can find ways of improving your utilization, then your returns on investment start to improve a lot. The worst way you can use your battery is to import electricity at night, only to export it at 15 pence per kilowatt hour. That's a 32-year payback. Your battery is going to be worn out long before you get to that payback period. So this is the reference case for the existing battery. So if we then take this calculation and apply it to the new battery, we've still got some other factors to consider. So it's a higher battery cost, it's £9,000, but we have got a 30 kilowatt hour battery capacity. And what that means is that we need fewer cycles in order to achieve break even. So in the case of the previous situation, you would only need 4 years if you were to, you get a 4-year payback if you were able to fully utilize nighttime consumption every single day. But as you can see, the utilization which I'm envisaging is very low indeed, only 20 days in this situation. And when it comes to nighttime import for consumption during the daytime, to run my heat pump, for example, I'm reckoning there are only 30 really cold days where I am needing extra help from an additional battery. Okay, and the reason it's only 30 days is because we want to look at my existing electricity bill, 6th of November to 5th of December. Look how much I've consumed at peak time. It's only 26.4 kilowatt hours. So this extra battery, which I'm looking at getting, one of the usage cases I've got is trying to eliminate daytime consumption from the grid altogether. But if this is the amount of money you are avoiding, then your savings are going to be quite limited. Most of the time, we're going to be taking solar generated from the solar fences, storing it in the battery because we can't export it straight away because we're already at the export limit, and then exporting it later on in the evening time. And I reckon there's probably 100 days a year, and that might be generous. That might be a generous estimation there. The real value in all of this is in the value of blackout. So if I just take this value here, remove it, you can see that if we just look at the conventional calculations for payback, we're looking at 16 years, just under 16 years payback. But the value of your blackout is not the value of your kilowatt hours, it's the value of your own time. Now, this is where things become really subjective. I have, in this instance, considered the value of your time to be equal to the value of the minimum wage. Some people think the value of their own time is equal to the wage that they would get paid at work. And you can argue one way or the other, but end of the day, it's a matter of perception. It's your investment into avoiding these things. But you need to also be realistic. What would a younger version of yourself with less money do in this situation? Would they invest the same in this kind of situation? Let's take, for example, a loss of comfort. Now, some people would be willing to spend £300 on a last-minute basis to go to a hotel room, in which case you can consider the payback as being 9.3 years. Other people wouldn't be willing to lose £300 for the sake of their comfort. They would rather suffer the discomfort for that 1 day or 2 days or whatever it is that they are suffering it. In which case, it's just the cost of having a sleeping bag and some extra warm clothes available. So there's a lot of subjectiveness in this situation in terms of calculating this. And it is very dangerous to calculate it and overvalue your time within the confines of a comfortable space where you've got plenty of money. If you had yourself in tighter financial circumstances, would you still value your that blackout in the same way? Businesses are a lot more focused. I could easily substitute lost work time for lost business time if you're a business premises. This becomes a very real and calculable value. You know how much revenue your business takes in every single day, and you know what the value of maintaining that revenue is for in a blackout situation. But for a domestic situation, these things are very subjective indeed. There are other values in doing this project. Number one, it's interesting. And number two, it helps me develop some, it's a hobby, and it helps me develop some skills as well. And never underestimate that there's so much satisfaction in being able to take this kind of idea and turn it into something which actually works. And that is something I'm hoping to do in the future. Let's go out here. So at the moment, the power cable going to the shed is a 6mm steel wire armored cable. It's underground. I don't want to be digging anymore. I don't want an underground cable. So what I'm thinking of doing is having maybe a plank of wood which goes from there to there, and then you run your cable through conduit for your emergency power cable, joining the shed with the main house, and then we can run the cable through the loft. But I haven't yet made that investment decision, and I'm going to see how my electricity bill is going to be after this winter has passed. Once we've had a whole year's worth of heat pump running, then I can actually understand what kind of value I'm saving by making a further investment decision about having a bigger battery. So if I'm going to be installing a battery, one of the things I have to do is I have to make a G99 application. This is something I was very tempted not to do because I already had an export MPAN number. But I'm going to have to say I want to do things properly because, amongst other reasons, it's the proper way to do things. And the other reasons is because this is all going on YouTube, and I'm sure SSE will be watching my videos as well. Now, the G99 application is quite straightforward. It's a 2-page application form. It's G99 AMD 9A1. I'm not going to show you the first page because that is personal details and also the name of the installer. But the technical side of things relates to just these two things. You've got details of existing generating units. So we've got the solar edge unit, and then details of proposed additional units. So in this case, I'm proposing a SunSync, and I'm proposing an April 2025 installation date. So this is interesting. This here, where does this code come from? This comes from the Energy Networks Association Type Approval Register. Let's go and take a look at that. And here it is. And in here, you've got various things. You've got the G100 declaration, and you've got various other aspects here. So you've got type test status certificates, and that's all very useful. Now, one other thing we needed to attach to this application was a schematic of what they were wanting to be included. So I've shown this schematic before, but there are a few modifications. So first of all, I'm no longer going with a Solis inverter. I'm going with a SunSync inverter. Two reasons. Number one, it's 8.8 kilowatts, which is powerful enough to run my heat pump. The Solis inverter was 6 kilowatts, and that, to my mind, was not powerful enough to run the heat pump under the worst case scenario, which is a backup heater running plus your heat pump. That will draw 5 kilowatts by itself. And The other reason is because in the future you could add more sun-sink inverters in parallel on the EPS circuit. You can't do that with solid inverters. They don't have sync relays. So other things which I've added to this diagram, I've shown what is new, what is existing, and also what is the network supplier's property. They were wanting those kind of details. What I found was that they replied to me within about 3 days, and the first reply was I filled out the wrong form. The second reply was could you clarify this diagram a little bit to make it clearer for us, please? And I've also added further notes on page 2 as well, and that's what I've submitted. So that is what I'm planning on in terms of my new project, and I'll see whether the numbers stack up over the course of the whole winter as to whether this is a worthwhile investment or not. So let's circle back to the first issue that I discussed, and that is how much money am I now spending on energy as a whole? Well, now all of my energy comes from electricity, so all I have to do is look at the balance of my electricity account. Now, since I got my heat pump installed, the balance in my electricity account has increased by £400 on account of solar export during the summertime, up until the beginning of October. And since the beginning of October, it's gone down by £100. We're now into the darkest month of the year, and we are now looking forward to January and February. So if it goes down by another £300, then I've got a license to say that I'm not spending any money in net terms on energy. And that's a pretty good state to be in. It's certainly a much better state to be in than when I was spending £27,500 over a 10-year period. Now, honestly, I probably think we're going to be spending more money than £300 between now and the end of February, but it won't be that much more. And yes, of course, I've still got destination charging and roadside charging for my car, which I haven't taken into account, but that doesn't amount to thousands of pounds. It only amounts to, at most, £200. So we're in a much better state, and I think we're starting to see where the value of these investments come into play. You are replacing your expenditure on perpetual products, which simply end up in carbon dioxide and water or smoke, and you're replacing it with durable assets. And in the case of my solar panels, they'll last about 25 years, and when they get replaced in 20 years time or sooner, they'll be replaced with upgraded products. But next video, I want to talk about my heat pump in a bit more detail. I've got more data to share with you. I've got a couple of new analysis techniques, and we can look at some cold nights now that we've got that data, where I'm living in the house on a cold night, and we can see how much energy we've spent on that cold night and on that cold day. So in the meantime, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you again very soon.